Late-night television was rocked to its core last night, as what began as a routine promotional appearance spiraled into an unprecedented confrontation between Stephen Colbert and Ben Affleck. The heated exchange left audience members stunned, crew scrambling and social media ablaze as the Hollywood A-lister and the talk show host clashed in a display that exposed the raw underbelly of celebrity culture. The tension was palpable from the moment Affleck took his seat. Colbert's opening pleasantries seemed strained, his trademark smile not quite reaching his eyes as he introduced the actor who was there to promote his latest directorial project. Viewers at home might have sensed something was off, but few could have predicted how quickly the interview would derail. "So, Ben, this new film of yours," Colbert began, tapping his blue card on the desk with unusual force. "I hear it's been quite the journey getting it made." Affleck nodded, settling into his chair. "Yeah, absolutely. 4 years from concept to completion. It's a story I really believe in." "4 years," Colbert interrupted, his tone carrying an edge that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the studio. "That's a long time to work on something that critics are calling derivative and self-indulgent, isn't it?" The audience's collective intake of breath was audible. Affleck blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I haven't actually seen those particular reviews," he replied, attempting to maintain his composure. "But everyone's entitled to their opinion. What I was trying to—" "Oh, I'm sorry," Colbert cut in again, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Maybe you don't read your reviews. Must be nice to be so unbothered by criticism when you've had as many bombs as you have lately." The studio fell silent. Even the band looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances as the camera caught Affleck's expression hardening. "Stephen, I'm not sure where this is coming from," Affleck said carefully. "But maybe we should get back to discussing the film itself. It's a story about redemption and—" "Redemption," Colbert echoed, leaning back in his chair with a dismissive chuckle. "That seems to be a recurring theme in your career announcements, if not your actual work. How many comebacks is this now?" "I've lost count." The attack was so pointed, so personal, that several audience members audibly gasped. Backstage, producers were frantically communicating through headsets, uncertain whether to cut to commercial or let the increasingly hostile exchange continue. Affleck set his jaw, visibly struggling to maintain his professionalism. "Look, I know late-night hosts need to be edgy, but this feels unnecessarily personal. Did I do something to offend you?" "Offend me?" Colbert's laugh was hollow as he shuffled his cards. "No, Ben, I'm just doing my job, asking the questions the audience wants answers to. Like why someone who's been so vocal about the superficiality of Hollywood keeps coming back for more rejection." The tension in the room was electric. Camera operators exchanged nervous glances, capturing both men's increasingly rigid body language. Affleck's publicist could be seen hovering anxiously at the edge of the set, unsure whether to intervene. "You know what, Stephen?" Affleck's voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. "I came here to have a professional conversation about a project I've poured my heart into. Not to be ambushed with whatever personal vendetta you seem to have against me or my career." "Ambushed?" Colbert's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Interesting choice of words from someone who's spent decades in this business. Shouldn't you be used to tough questions by now? Or do you only do interviews where people fawn over you? The audience was now completely silent, witnessing an exchange that had clearly veered far from the planned promotional interview. What should have been a light-hearted conversation had morphed into something that felt dangerously close to genuine animosity. Affleck took a deep breath, setting down the water glass he'd been clutching with white knuckles. "You know, I've always respected you as an interviewer," he said slowly. "Which makes this all the more disappointing. If you had actual questions about the filmmaking process or the themes of the movie, I'd be happy to discuss them. But it seems like you're more interested in creating some kind of viral moment at my expense." Colbert's smile was tight as he adjusted his glasses. Oh, I think we're beyond viral at this point, Ben. But since you mentioned the filmmaking process, is it true that 3 of your original leads quit the project, citing your impossible demands and erratic behavior on set? The accusation hung in the air, stunning everyone present. Affleck's expression shifted from controlled anger to genuine shock. "That is absolutely false," he responded, his voice louder now, "and frankly, irresponsible to repeat without verification." "Where did you even hear that?" "I have my sources," Colbert replied with a smug shrug. "Sources that suggest your reputation in the industry isn't quite as sterling as your PR team works to maintain." The show's producer was now visibly signaling for a commercial break, but Colbert ignored him, leaning forward with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. "Let's talk about what really happens on your sets, Ben. The temper tantrums when you don't get your way. The rewrites that keep everyone waiting. The creative differences that somehow always end with people walking away from projects with you." Affleck stood up abruptly, removing his microphone. "I'm not doing this," he said, his voice controlled but tight with anger. "This isn't an interview, it's character assassination, and I won't sit here for it." As he turned to leave, Colbert called after him. "Walking away from tough questions again, Ben? Isn't that becoming something of a pattern?" Affleck paused, turning slowly to face the host one last time, the studio lights catching the barely contained fury in his eyes. The first row of audience members could clearly hear what Affleck muttered next, words that would soon be analyzed endlessly across social media platforms and entertainment news outlets worldwide. "You know, Stephen, I've respected your work for years," Affleck said, his voice low but carrying enough that the front row microphones picked it up clearly. "But this isn't journalism or comedy. It's just cruel. And for what? Ratings?" Colbert's smirk faltered momentarily before he doubled down. "Oh, don't play the victim card now, Ben. Isn't that getting a little old? Almost as old as blaming the media for your own missteps?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the playful banter they had come to expect from Colbert's show. This was something altogether different. Something with an undercurrent of genuine malice that made several audience members exchange worried glances. "My missteps?" Affleck slowly walked back toward Colbert's desk, no longer caring that his microphone was off. His voice carried through the studio by sheer force of contained rage. "Let's talk about missteps. Let's talk about a host who's so desperate to stay relevant that he has to ambush his guests with fabricated gossip instead of having an actual conversation." A producer frantically gestured from off stage, drawing her finger across her throat, in the universal signal to cut the feed, but neither the camera operators nor Colbert himself seemed to notice or care. "Fabricated?" Colbert retorted, standing up now so that the two men were facing each other across the desk. "I've got 3 separate sources confirming the disaster that was your last set. Or should we talk about the real reason your last relationship fell apart? Because I've got sources for that too." The audience gasped collectively. Even for late-night television, this level of personal attack was unprecedented. Affleck's publicist was now on her phone, likely calling for reinforcements, while simultaneously trying to edge closer to the stage. "You want to go there?" Affleck's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Fine. Let's talk about your declining ratings. Let's talk about how many of your writers have quit in the last 6 months. Let's talk about how you've become so bitter that you're willing to destroy what little journalistic integrity you had left just to get a clip that might go viral." For the first time, Colbert seemed genuinely rattled. His eyes darted briefly to the side of the stage where his executive producer stood frozen in shock. "You don't know what you're talking about," Colbert hissed, his trademark composure cracking. "Don't I?" Affleck countered. "This industry is smaller than you think, Stephen. People talk. And lately they've been talking about how desperate you've become. How you'll do anything, sacrifice anyone, to stay on top." The tension in the studio was suffocating. Camera operators, trained to remain impassive regardless of what unfolded before their lenses, were visibly stunned by the raw hostility between host and guest. "You come on my show," Colbert said through gritted teeth, "and you dare to lecture me about integrity? That's rich coming from someone who—" "Someone who what?" Affleck cut him off. "Go ahead, say it. Whatever baseless accusation you were about to make, let's hear it. Because at this point, you've got nothing to lose, right? Your reputation for fair interviews is already in shreds." The band leader tentatively played a few notes, clearly hoping to defuse the situation, but quickly stopped when both men shot him withering glances. "You know what the difference between us is, Stephen?" Affleck continued, now addressing not just Colbert, but the entire stunned audience. "I own my mistakes, every single one. I've never pretended to be perfect. But you've built this holier-than-thou persona, this character who stands on his moral high ground and passes judgment on everyone else. And it's all an act." Colbert's face flushed dark red. "An act? You want to talk about acts? Your entire career is an act." "At least I'm honest about it," Affleck fired back. "I'm paid to play characters. What's your excuse for what you're doing right now?" A tense silence fell over the studio. One of the stage managers had his hand on the emergency commercial break button, ready to cut away at any moment. But like everyone else in the room, he seemed paralyzed by the unprecedented confrontation unfolding live on national television. "You know what, Ben?" Colbert finally said, his voice icy. "Maybe this interview was a mistake. Maybe you should just stick to directors who will ask you the softball questions you're clearly prepared for." "And maybe," Affleck replied, equally cold, "you should remember that the people sitting in that chair are human beings, not punching bags for whatever personal issues you're working through on any given day." The audience erupted into scattered applause, quickly silenced by Colbert's ice glare. Whatever professional courtesy had existed between the two men at the start of the segment had completely evaporated. "Don't you dare try to make me the villain here," Colbert said, pointing an accusatory finger. "You came onto my show to promote a film," Affleck interjected, "not to be blindsided with personal attacks and fabricated stories. That's not what I signed up for." "Oh, please," Colbert scoffed, "as if you haven't been in this business long enough to know how it works. Nothing is off limits, especially not for someone with your colorful history." Something dangerous flashed in Affleck's eyes. The already tense studio audience seemed to collectively hold their breath. Everyone could sense that a line was about to be crossed, one that couldn't be uncrossed. "My colorful history?" Affleck said, his voice dangerously level. "Let's be specific, Stephen. What exactly are you referring to?" The challenge hung in the air. Colbert, realizing he'd pushed too far, hesitated for the first time since the interview began. But something in his expression suggested he was too far gone to retreat now. "We all know what I'm talking about," Colbert said, his voice razor-sharp. "The various struggles you've been so public about. The relationships that have fallen apart spectacularly. The projects abandoned. You've made a career out of public redemption arcs, haven't you?" The studio was so silent you could hear the electrical hum of the lights overhead. Affleck stood completely still, his face unreadable for several excruciating seconds. "You're right about one thing," he finally said. "I have been public about my struggles, because I believe in accountability and honesty, which is exactly why I can't sit here and let you do this." He turned toward the stunned audience, addressing them directly for the first time. "What you're witnessing isn't entertainment," Affleck said, his voice steady but intense. "This isn't the light-hearted ribbing that's part of the talk show tradition. This is something else entirely. And I think it's important that you understand." "What's happening here?" Colbert attempted to interject, but Affleck raised his hand, silencing him with a look that could have frozen fire. "Stephen prepared for this interview with the explicit intention of humiliating me," he continued, "not discussing my film, not engaging in genuine conversation, but creating a viral moment at the expense of basic human decency. The executive producer was now frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but the camera operators, transfixed by the unfolding drama, kept their lenses trained on the confrontation. "That's not," Colbert began, but Affleck wasn't finished. "I've sat in many interview chairs over the decades. I've been asked tough questions. I've been challenged. That's part of the job, and I've never shied away from it. But what happened here tonight crosses a line that shouldn't be crossed, not just for me, but for anyone who appears on this show." The audience had shifted from uncomfortable silence to rapt attention. Several people were filming with their phones, ensuring that whatever happened next would be captured from multiple angles. "You know, Stephen," Affleck continued, his voice now carrying a note of genuine disappointment, "I used to admire your intelligence, your willingness to speak, truth to power. But this, attacking someone for personal struggles they've been open about, fabricating rumors about their professional conduct, this isn't speaking truth to power. It's just cruelty masquerading as journalism." Colbert's face had lost its mocking expression, replaced by something that, to the keen observer, looked almost like shame. But his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. "My job is to ask the questions others won't," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "No," Affleck countered firmly. "Your job is to entertain and inform, to create a space where guests and audience can connect. What you did tonight serves neither purpose." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "In the interest of transparency, I'm going to read you something," he said, addressing the audience again. "This is an email my team received outlining the topics we agreed would be covered tonight. Notice what's not on this list? Personal attacks, fabricated rumors, character assassination." Colbert's producer was now physically approaching the stage, likely to force the commercial break that had been ignored. But Affleck's next words stopped him in his tracks. "I won't be returning to this show," he said simply, "and I suspect many of my colleagues will make the same choice when they see this footage, because at the end of the day, we all have a choice about the environments we agree to enter and the treatment we're willing to accept." The statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. Even Colbert seemed momentarily stunned by the gravity of what was happening. A major Hollywood figure effectively blacklisting his show in real time, on his own stage. "Ben," Colbert finally said, his tone shifting to something approaching conciliatory, "perhaps we got off on the wrong foot." "No." "Stephen," Affleck interrupted, his anger now tempered with something like pity. "We didn't get off on the wrong foot. You made a calculated decision to ambush me for ratings, and now you're facing the consequences of that decision." He turned to leave once more, but paused and addressed the audience one final time. "I hope what you've witnessed tonight makes you think about the kind of media you consume and support, about the difference between accountability and cruelty, between honest journalism and exploitation. We all deserve better than this." With that, Affleck walked off the stage, leaving Colbert standing alone behind his desk in stunned silence. The audience, after a moment of collective shock, erupted, some in applause, others in confused murmurs. The camera caught Colbert's face as the reality of what had just transpired sank in. His expression cycled through anger, defensiveness, and finally, as the credits began to roll prematurely, something that looked remarkably like regret. Backstage, Affleck's publicist met him with wide eyes. "That's going to be everywhere by morning," she said, already scrolling through the notifications lighting up her phone. "Good," Affleck replied, his voice weary but resolved. "Maybe it needed to happen. Maybe it's time we had a conversation about the line between entertainment and exploitation." As they exited the building, a small crowd of crew members watched in respectful silence. One of the younger production assistants nodded slightly as Affleck passed, a subtle gesture of respect. That spoke volumes. By midnight, clips of the confrontation had already gone viral. By morning, it would be the lead story on entertainment news. Colbert's rating would take a hit, while a surprising number of industry figures would publicly stand with Affleck, many sharing their own stories of ambush interviews and betrayed trust. What had begun as a routine promotional appearance had become something far more significant, a moment that would spark a genuine conversation about respect, boundaries, and the culture of celebrity journalism. For once, the viral moment hadn't come at the expense of someone's dignity, but in defense of it.